A moment later, a cry was heard from the house, and the source was Xiao Jin, who Wu Kai couldn't kill. Suddenly, someone asked about what had happened, and turning around, Xiao Jin was immediately overjoyed as he saw a gorgeous little sister. Xiao Jin explained that he didn't realize what had happened. He was just eating meat when a fat man suddenly appeared and started poking him with a knife. Sophie assumed that he was knocked out by Liu Feng, but the dragon said that Liu Feng was called out by someone and left, and that the fat man was knocked out because he had just raised his hand to block the blow, but he suddenly flew away. Sophie couldn't believe that a mere child could defeat Wu Kai so easily, and after looking at him, she was convinced. After that, she saw the bottle and realized that Wu Kai had actually just tripped over it and fell down, and Xiao Jin thought that he was the one who knocked him out. After she finished thinking, she asked Xiao Jin where Liu Feng was, and he told her that the person who had called Liu Feng was wearing a black cloak and had a picture of a scale against the sun on his back. Hearing this, Sophie went into a stupor, for she realized who it was. Meanwhile, Liu Feng continued his battle with Aho. After fighting with him for a while, he was still able to recognize the power of the 9th level peak, and it seemed that he was now unable to match that power. Even so, he wasn't going to give up so easily, and so he decided to use a mirror clone. Aho admitted that it was rather unexpected and even complimented him on the amount of techniques he possessed, after which he blocked Liu Feng's attack. But seeing that the clone still didn't move, he assumed that the clone was only created as a distraction, so he thrust his sword, even more interested in the fact that the owner attacked head-on while the clone was inactive. Just as suddenly, Liu Feng abruptly disappeared and appeared behind Aho in the next instant, but Aho was able to spot the move and was still able to block his punch. Immediately after that, Aho noticed that his armor started to crack, then kicked the ground, throwing Liu Feng away. He was shocked that this technique could create not just an illusion, but an actual clone, for he had never heard of such a thing before. At the same time, Sophie ran in the direction where Liu Feng passed. She thought that since he was taken away, it was probably the captain of the law enforcement squad, Aho. He was ruthless, but she couldn't understand what the one attacking him was about, assuming it was because of the Rhapsody Regiment, and so she wanted to figure it out, as she suddenly saw that the members of the law enforcement squad were busy doing something nearby. She wondered what the reason was for them choosing to ignore Xiao Jin. Sophie wasn't going to lose Liu Feng. After all this time, there was a decent level 9 who could be her assistant, and therefore she wanted to stop Aho as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Liu Feng had already used up almost all of his inner strength and could no longer use it. Aho admitted that Liu Feng was quite strong because without armor, he might have lost. Therefore, he decided to deal with Liu Feng with just one full force punch. After assessing his strength, Liu Feng realized that he only had one chance, after which he jumped into the air. Immediately afterward, Aho's fighting spirit ignited and he used a horizontal strike. After that, he raised his blade upwards using the moon scythe to hit Liu Feng. Seeing the approaching attack, Liu Feng panicked, because the attack had too large a radius while Hua Xia could only increase her speed, because of which he couldn't dodge, and because he had no escape route. He wondered if there was another method to use Hua Xia. Immediately after, he jumped out of the air dodging the moon scythe and immediately tore towards Aho, and gave him a fatal blow right on his armor, from which it could not withstand and broke. Losing his last strength, Aho fell to his knee, then asked how Liu Feng was able to pierce through his armor, to which Liu Feng replied that there is no absolute defense in this world. After all, the best defense is offense. When Aho heard this, he couldn't help but agree and chuckled and said that when he reached the 9th level, he had the strongest armor, which made him stop feeling blows, and from that moment on, he never trained again. Then he wiped the blood flowing from his mouth and thanked Liu Feng for the challenge, calling Liu Feng his brother, which made him stunned as the enemy didn't care that Liu Feng almost died. After tidying himself up, Aho advised to go back to town and settle down with friends. Upon hearing about his friends, Liu Feng pointed his blade at him and asked what was wrong with his friends and what he should do to him, from which Aho smirked and told him that Liu Feng was really stupid, and told him that if he hadn't saved his friends, they would be dead now. Liu Feng was shocked at what he heard, because he didn't expect someone like Aho to help him, and Aho continued to talk about how Liu Feng had let his guard down, leaving his friends alone. At this moment, Liu Feng remembered that Wu Kai was still alive, causing Aho to laugh as he still remembered him. After that, Liu Feng asked if Aho thought that he had left no defense. After all, Aho was just a bug in front of teacher Kenshi. But Aho refused to believe it. He said that he understood that it was hard to believe, but he still advised him not to bother him. In his mind, Liu Feng hoped that Kenshi was able to protect Xiaojin, because the boy didn't know about his strength and could make a mess of things. After which, Aho advised Liu Feng not to think about the Rhapsody Mercenary Regiment as he would personally shut everything down, and therefore allowed Liu Feng to leave. Liu Feng was surprised at this. After all, he had come to arrest him and now he was releasing him, and Aho explained that the affairs of the Rhapsodian Mercenary Regiment weren't even worth his interference. From such an explanation, Liu Feng rubbed his head and still asked why then Aho wasted so much time for the sake of fighting him. After which, Aho smirked and admitted that Liu Feng was very interested in him. Liu Feng was startled by the fact that some man was interested in him, and once stepped away from him apologizing for not being one of those. From which Aho decided to explain that he was only interested in strength. He admitted that he had provoked Liu Feng to show his true strength in the beginning, but he had never expected him to be stronger. But Liu Feng refuted this by saying that he can only draw because he has more moves and he calculates everything. He recognized that he didn't have enough strength and he still needed practice. He just had to get stronger to kill the lord of the city. After speaking out, Liu Feng sighed and said that Aho appreciated his strength, so he wanted to know what he wanted from him. Aho asked Liu Feng if he knew who the main enemy of humanity was and the latter suggested that it might be orcs. And Aho shouted that this was the right answer and said that there would come a day when mankind would still be able to defeat the orcs. So he hoped that Liu Feng would also be among those who would defeat the orcs. Aho told them that the orcs had many tribes and they were starting to get closer and closer to them, which could only mean that the orcs were running out of game, and that's why they want to take over the fertile human lands, because of which every 3 years there is a battle between the human and orc races, and if the orcs can win, they will invade the country and wipe out the population. Liu Feng asked what would happen if the humans won and Aho explained that in that case, the orcs would retreat to their own lands in preparation for the next battle in 3 years. Hearing this, Liu Feng realized that orcs in battles tested human strength, from which it came out that they weren't that stupid. Liu Feng then asked why not take the initiative after the victory and wipe out the orc raiders. To which Aho replied that the northern meadows was a very vast and undiscovered area, making it difficult to even track them down, let alone destroy them. From what Liu Feng heard, he realized that humanity was at a great disadvantage, for if they lost, their lands would be ruined, and if they won, they would only gain 3 years. And Aho said that it was enough for people to be convinced that the borders were safe. Aho said that orcs and humans pay too much attention to battles and send their best warriors to war. And since the humans had lost last time, the orcs had been able to invade their lands and the humans had lost too much, so they couldn't afford to lose again. The 4 major colleges of humans would send elites, but that year the orcs had sent 2 9th-ranked warriors and they would probably come this time as well. And since only the 2 of them had reached the 9th level in Sunset Fortress, he hoped that Liu Feng would team up with him against the orc threat. After thinking for a bit, Liu Feng still agreed to fight for the humans. After all, it was his natural duty. Hearing this, Aho hugged Liu Feng, calling him brother, and patting him on the back began to thank him. After a while, Sophie went outside the city and looked for Liu Feng, trying to figure out why she hadn't found Liu Feng or Aho yet, as she suddenly noticed Liu Feng calmly walking nearby, which she wondered if it was really him. After which, she immediately ran up to him and asked if he was alright, while Liu Feng wondered what she was doing here. And Sophie began to look around asking where Aho was. She suspected that since Liu Feng was still alive, Aho was already dead. After all, if that one survived, it would probably haunt him, and so she needed to hide Liu Feng somewhere. But she couldn't think of a place where he could get away with it. Liu Feng explained to her that brother Aho was fine, and he went to the orc territory to reconnoiter, because judging from the column of smoke, something was clearly happening there. Sophie was shocked to hear about it, because Aho had recently taken him out of town, and now Liu Feng was calling him brother. But Liu Feng asked for a chance to rest and promised to tell everything if Sophie treated him to dinner. That same evening, Sophie's house. After listening to Liu Feng's story, Sophie called the ego amazing because she would never have thought that Liu Feng was capable of defeating Aho. But Liu Feng explained that he only won because he used a trick, and if he had only relied on strength and fighting skills, he wouldn't have been able to defeat brother Aho. After which Sophie said that he was able to win because he had some sort of skill, and asked if it was too reckless to agree to fight against the orcs. hearing about Liu Feng's recklessness, inquired what she meant by this, and Sophie realized that apparently Aho had withheld some details from Liu Feng, from which Liu Feng realized that he was in big trouble. Sophie asked if he knew what orc madness was, to which he immediately gave a negative answer, and Sophie explained that madness is a skill that all orcs have. It increases attack by 50%. And it is this skill that provides the Orc Empire with incredible power, but it has a side effect. Using madness, orcs go into a frenzy and kill everyone they see until they are exhausted. In past duels, orcs have used this skill to win, and if the orcs were losing, they could not help but fall into madness and start tearing and throwing everything around. Liu Feng agreed that this skill was quite dangerous, and Sophie took the chance to inform him that only the 4 major colleges and Sunset Fortress experts were involved in the battles, as the others simply couldn't risk their elites. And of all the level 9 masters, only Aho had fought in the last few years, and so she thought about Liu Feng meeting with Aho tomorrow and rejecting his proposal. But Liu Feng replied that there was no need to do so, because the promises made could not be broken, and besides, he was completely confident that he could win. Hearing this, Sophie giggled at how courageous Liu Feng was and suggested that he celebrate their exploits in advance. An hour later, a tipsy Sophie was telling Liu Feng that if she had someone as strong as him, the mercenary guild headquarters would quickly get behind her and she wouldn't be in this situation. Liu Feng asked what happened to that woman, to which Sophie replied that there are not few in the world who keep their sisters as princesses. Then Sophie mentally laughed off this and told Liu Feng that they were just the descendants of mercenary King Su Han. He was sure that women were not worthy to be heirs. Sophie said that from birth she was inspired by the glory and splendor of her ancestors and grew up with a sword in her hands and a fighting spirit in her heart. Her father raised her in extreme austerity, hoping that one day she would take the position of chairman of the mercenary guild after him. But she is not the only claimant to that legacy. After all, she has 2 cousins and they get more support from the family since they are men, and therefore she has no right to make mistakes, so they don't bypass her. However, when they gave the current chairman a 9-level warrior, they immediately rushed to write her off to the border. On top of that, right now she doesn't even want to be an heir anymore. Right after taking a sip of wine, she sharply asked Liu Feng if he knew why she wanted him for the role of commander. She admitted that she was just looking for a way to get close to him, but there was no way she could think he could refuse such a generous offer. And Liu Feng explained that he didn't know that before, and that's why he turned her down, but he's willing to help her. He agrees to help her without even joining her squad. Sophie asked if he was really willing to do it, and Liu Feng said he would do his best since she was his friend. Immediately after which, she rose from her chair, causing Liu Feng to wonder what she wanted, and said that she was very happy about it, because with his help she would definitely be able to take the chair. Just as suddenly she froze abruptly, and a second later she vomited blood. Liu Feng asked her what was wrong. Wasn't she excited enough to start coughing up blood? To which she replied that it was all about using disintegration and lots of alcohol. On emotion can easily cause internal damage. Hearing this, Liu Feng wondered if Huaxia could heal internal injuries. Then he took Sophie's hand and injected internal energy into her body, asking if it made her feel better. Sophie asked what he had done, for she thought the pain inside had disappeared because of the illusions, and Liu Feng was glad that he was able to help this, causing him to be forced to admit that he was quite smart. While Liu Feng was treating her, Sophie suddenly remembered that Elder Zhu Sun had told her about a way to treat pathological internal disease injuries. She wanted to know if it was the right way, because although Zhu Sun had mentioned it, no one had ever been able to do it. Then she casually uttered that Elder Zhu Sun's words were true, and Liu Feng asked her who she meant, right after which she was embarrassed and slapped her hand to thank him and said that she was already fine. Liu Feng asked if she was sure about it, to which she answered in the affirmative and said that she had some things to tell, after which, she found and gave Liu Feng the received order, introducing him into a stupor. Liu Feng said that he was already familiar with this order, as he and Kenshi had already been offered it by someone, lured by a large sum of money. On that letter had the same stamp on it, and they had met when they went to see her. Sophie explained that this brand is the mark of the Huajin Chamber of Commerce, and the proxy in his hands is privately issued for the Mercenary Guild, but the content of the award is completely in line with his order. Liu Feng rubbed his head and asked what kind of Huajin Chamber of Commerce is this, because it sounds incredible. Sophie then motioned for him to sit down, for she was going to tell him everything in as much detail as possible. The Huajin Chamber of Commerce is one of the 3 largest chambers of commerce on the continent. They have their own transportation company, and all the mercenary guild orders released last year were A and even S rank. But this time it's just a C rank escort mission, but even so the reward for it is too big. Listening carefully to Sophie, Liu Feng assumed that Huajin simply had nowhere to put his money. After all, the rich could have their own quirks, but Sophie immediately refuted it, because this time they skipped the mercenary guilds and named 3 B-rank mercenary regiments, since it's hard to find those who will accept a C-rank mission among the mercenary regiments. After listening to Sophie, Liu Feng couldn't help but agree that this was all really strange, and Sophie said that she had already asked around the other 3 mercenary regiments, and they knew a little about this order. Huajin Trading Company is a rather secretive company, but this time something was clearly wrong. Therefore, she hopes that for her own safety, Liu Feng will not accept this order. But Liu Feng refused her, saying that they were obligated to do so, which made her wonder why. Liu Feng explained that they were too poor, and they had a huge debt at the tavern, and he owed Sophie money, and they had forgotten to take the money Mo2 had given them. Sophie felt uncomfortable listening to this, but even as he accepted the order he recognized that Sophie's words made sense. The letter itself was entrusted to Beta, but he'd better not be involved. After realizing that Liu Feng could no longer be persuaded, Sophie decided to make him one suggestion. After a while, the workers were finishing loading the goods onto the cart. Just as suddenly, Liu Feng approached them and squeezing through the workers he began to strive for the main thing. After which, he introduced himself as Liu Feng of the Fire Mercenaries and said that he had come to bring this flyer. But Uncle was interested in where Ken Shi was and why he didn't come himself, since he had bought a gun from him last time. And rubbing his head, Liu Feng explained that Ken Shi was rather busy right now, and therefore couldn't come. Uncle was shocked by what he heard and asked if no one else from the fire regiment was coming. But Liu Feng asked him not to worry about it because the 2 of them were quite enough for the job. But before work he wanted to warn them, as there were only 2 of them he advised them to be careful of the other regiments. He did not want them to provoke them as they had a bad temper. Liu Feng thanked his uncle for the warning and promised not to get into trouble, after which he left. Right after that, Sophie decided to propose something to Liu Feng. The 2 of them were authorized on behalf of the fire regiment, and with their strength, it would be quite easy to leave. And Liu Feng said that he should do it himself, but he wondered why she went with him. To which she replied that he was given the task for the first time, and therefore she should go with him as an experienced mercenary. Liu Feng thanked her for her help, after which she leaned over and whispered that he would owe her for it. After a while, Liu Feng and Sophie got into the wagons and set off on the road to fulfill the mission. While inside the carriage, Sophie carefully watched Liu Feng's cultivation. Liu Feng, on the other hand, conducted internal energy through acupuncture points, fate, fall, spirit stage, divine judgment and length. But after completing his cultivation, he reprimanded that he still couldn't conduct energy through all the points. Sophie asked him what this technique was that he was trying so hard to learn, and Liu Feng said that this is the Huaxia technique, and although it is simple, it is the foundation of all internal exercises. The essence of Huaxia is to pierce acupuncture points in the body, and although the method has only a small chance of success, he had practiced a lot and still managed to pierce 5 points, but the last 2 were still impossible. Sophie admitted that she had only understood that the technique was very difficult to control and that even with 5 points, he was incredibly strong, and then asked if he would reach saint level by breaking through the 6th or 7th point. He sighed and said that it wasn't that easy. After all, every time he activated Huaxia, he would face a greater gap and his strength would increase, but it would only become more difficult in the future. And he admitted that he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to open the last points for the next few years. As suddenly Sophie pulled his cheek and told him to just not activate it for nothing and better save his strength for the battle with the orcs. But Liu Feng couldn't be patient as he needed to become stronger as soon as possible for the sake of resurrecting Wei Er. Sophie asked him what was wrong and he explained that he was just thinking about how they could defeat the orcs. After some time spent talking, they did reach the border of the orc lands. Liu Feng glanced out the window and looking at the mercenaries said that he would give them at least level 7 since they looked stronger than the fire regiment. And Sophie explained that it was because they only took military assignments. And Liu Feng was surprised at what he heard and told Sophie that she didn't mention military assignments. And she replied that they are cannon units that are engaged during the war between the two countries, making money for a living. Hearing this, Liu Feng thought this assignment was suspicious since 3 regiments of B-class mercenaries who only perform military missions were invited for a normal C-class escort mission, then asked Sophie to tell about those 3 mercenary regiments, to which Sophie replied that since she is the head of the mercenary guild, there are few regiments she doesn't know about, and she told him that the Bloody Mercenary Regiment is led by an 8th level swordsman, the Death Cap Regiment is led by a 7th level fighter, and the rebel mercenaries are led by an 8th level crystal knight with an iron-sided dragon lizard, and together they are very strong. These 3 are as close as brothers and even the mistress is the same, which made Liu Feng shocked at her knowledge. Liu Feng wondered what should accompany a Huajin chamber with such strength, and Sophie admitted that she was also curious to find out. Suddenly the cart stopped, and the uncle said to Liu Feng that the chairman would like to meet with him to discuss something, and Liu Feng whispered to Sophie that he would go down and that he hoped their foxtail would be discovered, and Sophie warned him to be careful. Afterward, his uncle led Liu Feng into the tent, where the captains of the 3 regiments were already waiting for him enjoying the Tibetan wine of the Huajin chamber. And as soon as he entered, then the man at the table immediately introduced himself as the chairman of the Huajin Chamber of Commerce, Huan, and the people beside him were the commanders of the other 3 regiments hired by the caravan, after which, he introduced Liu Feng to the regimental commanders and they immediately made a threatening appearance trying to intimidate him. Liu Feng awkwardly said hello to them, but mentally he knew that they were not happy to see him here. Chairman Huan wondered what this kid's strength was. After all, he could ignore the breath of these 3, but Liu Feng made him feel uncomfortable, so he wondered where she had found such a master. Huan coughed to distract everyone from Liu Feng and asked them not to get so angry. After all, he had summoned them all to discuss the itinerary with them. Liu Feng asked what they needed to discuss. After all, the itinerary had long been determined, so he wanted to know what the chairman was hiding from them. But Huan asked him not to worry about this mission, and said that he had already informed them of everything and wasn't hiding anything. He actually just wants to explain everything. After all, the 4 regiments had discussed everything beforehand and now everything is going according to plan. Hence he asked Liu Feng to calm down and sit down. After thinking about what he said for a bit, Liu Feng still dared to sit down and asked to speak what he wanted. Afterward, Huan took out a map and asked everyone to consider the route they planned to take, and pointing a finger near a lone tower he warned that this was the place they should be most careful. Shui Long aka Blood Wolf, and being the commander of the Bloody Regiment, asked what could go wrong there. After all, it was a normal passage to the Orc Valley. Huan explained that many of them don't know, but the Huajin Chamber of Commerce that hired them has also organized them and an escort that will accompany them to that place. And since the situation with the orcs is quite complicated, they can't relax. The angry Shui Long asked who even needed this reasoning. After all, they would naturally be more vigilant when they reached the orc lands. And the commander of the Death Cap Regiment, Jia Sha aka Prisoner Killer, couldn't help but agree with him. Liu Feng thought about how desperate this trio is. After all, they are no doubt confident in their strength, and do not think about how suspicious this mission is. Liu Feng then said that they didn't know what was sent besides the usual cargo, but judging from the number of people sent, it was clear that the battle would be quite big, to which Huan replied that it was confidential information and that he had told them everything he could. Everyone was amazed that it was so confidential, and Liu Feng complained that it was unfair because so many mercenaries were invited on such a small mission, and they can't even find out what is being delivered. After that, the mercenary rebel commander Bao Gang along with the others had to agree that Liu Feng was quite smart. Liu Feng said that the fire regiment did not want to take the risks of taking part in such an impure matter, and therefore announced that they were leaving, but Huan wasn't going to let him go and said that if they all stayed, their management would pay them triple the original amount. And Liu Feng, sensing the prophet, asked if they had any other demands, which made Bao Gang feel uncomfortable because of Liu Feng's greed. Huan said that if there were no more objections, they would stop there, and the additional fee would be sent later. After a while, the commanders finished their meal and left the chairman's tent. Liu Feng thought about the fact that this mission was very suspicious. In addition, the chairman went for such a generous reward, and therefore Liu Feng did not really want to take any risks. But since it would be easy for them to leave Sophie, he decided to stay and watch the situation unfold. Huan asked them not to go too far and Jia Sha agreed with him while Xuelong said that rich people are too boring if they have to make such trivial remarks. Jia Sha wanted to say something to Liu Feng, but Xuelong elbowed him and asked him not to scare the guy and suggested to talk somewhere else. Jia Sha chuckled and told Liu Feng that they had a little secret for him that they wanted to share, and so he suggested to move away not far from the camp. To which Liu Feng replied that it wasn't a problem since he himself wouldn't mind learning about the commanders. After moving farther away from the camp, Liu Feng asked what they wanted to tell him. Yi Xuelong said that although the assignment is generously paid, but there are 4 of them because of which the money will not be divided very evenly. And Bao Gang added that if he is interested in friendship, he better consciously quit, after which Jia Sha added that otherwise he will die. Liu Feng suggested that they had united to drive him away and the commanders agreed. They said that they wouldn't drive each other away as they were like brothers. And Liu Feng agreed that it made sense since they would be able to get more money, but he refused to leave. Instead he'd rather kick them out and get a reward for all of them. Hearing this, the commanders were stunned by what was said, but still they agreed to help him die if he wanted to. And Bao Gang said they would teach him a lesson he would not soon forget. Xuelong used his ring and pulled out a huge sword, surprising Liu Feng by having a spatial ring, after which, Jia Sha suddenly became a monster hybrid from what Liu Feng called it, turning into an ugly uncle soldier. And lastly, Bao Gang recited a spell summoning an ancient deity to sign a blood contract, from which Liu Feng was surprised that such old-fashioned spells could work, and thought it would be good to summon Barabara or something else. After finishing his battle preparations, Xuelong offered Liu Feng one last chance to escape, but Liu Feng asked him not to worry about him immediately, after which Xuelong struck his blow to teach him a lesson for his arrogance. But Liu Feng was easily able to dodge his attack even without using techniques. Immediately after which, Xuelong continued his attack, throwing numerous stones at Liu Feng. Just as suddenly, Jia Sha attacked Liu Feng, who was taking cover from the rocks from the back. Liu Feng immediately turned around to repel his attack after reflecting the stones. Immediately after, he was attacked by Bao Gang from the back of his black-sided lizard, but Liu Feng bounced off the ground dodging the attack and was immediately above the enemy. And after flying a little farther, he said he was finally able to warm up and was now ready for a real battle. Bao Gang praised Liu Feng as he was stronger than he thought and even had the courage to fight the 3 of them at once, while Xuelong said that he was afraid that Liu Feng would really win if they didn't stop playing. Some of the escort members decided to watch the fight and were surprised to see the captain of the fire regiment restraining the 3 commanders, as suddenly Sophie came out to them with a mask on her face and said it was an amazing sight. And as soon as the others told her to keep her voice down, Sophie started yelling at Liu Feng to destroy the opponents. Hearing Sophie, Liu Feng turned around and was startled by her appearance, then asked why she had become ghost-like, to which she replied that it was just a skin care mask. Pointing to the crowd behind, Liu Feng said that the fight could not continue any longer and suggested that the commanders disperse. But Xuelong refused, saying that it didn't work like that. After all, he hadn't lost yet and they hadn't won. And besides, it would be hard to forget what happened today, and to settle the matter with the public, Xuelong threatened them that he would deduct their annual salary if they didn't leave within 10 seconds. Frightened by the loss of money, the entire audience immediately dispersed and Sophie was left alone. Xuelong told Sophie that they were having a 3-on-1 battle and if she wanted, she could join Liu Feng as an assistant. But Sophie refused, saying that Liu Feng could beat them alone. Then she remembered that her mask was drying very quickly outside, and after asking them to continue the fight she immediately left. Liu Feng asked the outgoing Sophie if he should say that she believed in him too much or had no conscience, to which she replied that she was just optimistic. As soon as Sophie left, the 3 commanders immediately pounced on Liu Feng. Liu Feng praised the B-class captains for their strength, but said that even so, they were far from level 9, and the captains used their common combo punch of kill, brutality, wolf. Liu Feng easily dodged Bao Gang's entire series of attacks, immediately after which, Xuelong attacked him with his flaming sword. But Liu Feng was once again able to block his opponent's punch, whereupon Xuelong shouted that he was changing, and immediately recoiled while Jia Sha was rushing towards Liu Feng at full speed, and began to crowd him with a series of powerful punches that he blocked. Suddenly, Liu Feng noticed that Xuelong had gotten distracted and started eating and started shouting what he was doing. After all, they were having a battle right now. Hearing the joke made Xuelong's tears flow, and he asked how he could speak with such skills, and Bao Gang agreed with his words since being in the majority they would defeat him sooner or later. Liu Feng asked if there were really that much more of them and used the mirror clone right, after which he pounced on Xuelong. Xuelong and Bao Gang were shocked by what they saw and thought that Liu Feng was a wizard who used mirror magic. Immediately after which Liu Feng and Xuelong's blades collided, but Liu Feng started to overpower Xuelong and he shouted to Bao Gang to attack. After which, Liu Feng jumped up and to teach them a lesson for their behavior. He used a double surge against them, but unable to withstand such a strong attack, Xuelong and Bao Gang were defeated. Meanwhile, Jia Sha's gloves too were no longer able to endure his attacks and broke. The commanders were completely exhausted from this battle and Xuelong decided to ask if Liu Feng had reached the strength of a saint. But Liu Feng refuted it by saying that he was actually only a 9th level, from which the trio were shocked that he's only level 9, because that sounds even more unpleasant. Suddenly Huan came up to them and asked why instead of resting, the captains started fighting with Brother Liu. He wanted to know why they were simply wasting their strength, and if anyone finds out about it, their reputation will be tarnished. And Xuelong began to explain that it wasn't like that, because they had actually just met Brother Liu here. Since they respect his strength very much, they decided to discuss some fighting techniques, after which, he put his arm around Liu Feng and asked if that was the case. At the same time, with a gesture of his other hand, he asked if he could do him a favor, and Liu Feng asked Huan not to worry about it. After all, they were just having fun. Hearing this from Liu Feng, Huan was forced to agree with his explanation since this mission was very important. Immediately after which, Xuelong warned Huan that they would return to rest right away. After a while, Liu Feng approached the 3 commanders and reminded them that their battle had ended in a draw. But those immediately started apologizing to Liu Feng and Xuelong slapped his hands on his face and asked if Liu Feng would report it. To which Liu Feng replied that they had no reason to apologize and that they just had to be sincere. Then the commanders fell silent and began to look among themselves. After thinking about it for a bit, Xuelong offered him a reward, 10% to Liu Feng and the rest to the 3 of them. But Liu Feng took away Xuelong's hand and said that he didn't need the money. After all, from today, they would become his mercenaries and follow him wherever he went. The 3 of them froze and after a moment, they agreed that Liu Feng would be their boss from now on. And they were also happy that they were subordinated to the 9th level. Liu Feng rubbed his head in surprise because this was not what he had expected. Watching from the side, Huan asked the woman what she thought of this kid, and she admitted that he was quite strong, and was even able to defeat that trio without much effort. Huan asked if he was really that strong, and how strong he was compared to her, to which she replied that she wasn't sure for sure, as his movements were quite unusual. After hearing this, Huan was sure that with Liu Feng's help, their mission would be much easier. Soon they would meet the orcs, and it was a matter of life and death. Kenshi dejectedly wrote about how he owed a lot of money to the tavern, so much so that Brother Liu went on a mission to get a reward. He also added in the letter that Beta and others are also on assignment and asked to add and subtract that. He hoped they would pay off the debt at the tavern while Liu Feng and Beta ran errands. He then approached Xiao Jin eating meat and asked if he was worried about Brother Liu. Xiao Jin finished nibbling the bone and threw it away and asked why Liu Feng didn't take him with him. He asked if they all thought he was just a child, to which Ken Shi replied that Brother Liu cares about him and that's why he was worried that something might happen to him. After that Xiao Jin asked why even Beta didn't take him and Ken replied that their mission was too complicated and also Captain Aho let them stay in this room. Ken Shi explained that Liu Feng had given him to take care of him, so he couldn't let Xiao Jin suffer. But he replied that he thought Ken Shi hated him, because he was actually very strong, and Ken agreed that Xiao Jin was the best. But Xiao Jin said that he was aware of everyone looking down on him, and he was really amazing. After which, Xiao Jin inhaled a full chest of air and exhaled some sparks. Immediately afterward, he inhaled again and this time he exhaled a huge amount of fire. Ken Shi was completely shocked with surprise while Xiao Jin was rather boasting to himself. Just as suddenly, 2 residents started yelling that there was a fire. Then they started pointing out the window at Ken Shi and Xiao Jin and shouting that it was all their fault. Because of what happened, Ken Shi panicked and squatted down as they were spotted, while Xiao Jin was afraid that he would be killed for such a thing. They sat, each beside the other, listening to people outside yelling about how fast this fire was spreading. Gaining determination, Ken Si tearfully looked out the window again and realized that they were finished, for they would have to pay for all of this. Meanwhile, wolves began to gather near Liu Feng's caravan, and he felt as if something was wrong, so he decided to look around. Liu Feng asked Sophie why she was smiling like that, and she replied that it was just her thinking, that despite his sloppiness, he can still be counted on. After which, the puzzled Liu Feng asked whether she was scolding him or praising him, but in response, she waved her hand at him and told him to go and not to worry as it was annoying. After getting out of the carriage, Liu Feng saddled the horse and called out to the blood wolf, then approached him. Xuelong asked what happened since Liu Feng came to him, and he replied that he just wanted to see what was going on here, which made Xuelong laugh and said that Liu Feng had nothing to worry about since he was here. Liu Feng said that they were approaching the place that Huan had warned them about, and asked if anything unusual had happened. Xuelong revealed that nothing had happened at the moment, but the escorts from the Chamber of Commerce would be leaving soon, hence he had sent someone to wait in a state of readiness. After which, Liu Feng turned around and Xuelong asked what he was looking at. Liu Feng pointed at the wolves and explained that there were more and more of them following the caravan. Xuelong asked him not to worry as they were only third-level blood wolves, and they were probably following them to pick up the leftovers of the discarded food. Moreover, they wouldn't be able to do anything with as many people as they had in their caravan. But Liu Feng admitted that he was afraid that it wasn't that simple here. After all, he had been following them for some time now, and from what they threw out, the wolves hadn't eaten anything. He revealed that it was more like tracking than trying to eat the remains of their food, and so he fears that this mission is connected to the brutal blood wolves. Just as suddenly, the men sent on a reconnaissance rushed in and reported that a huge number of blood wolves had been discovered near the right and left rear, as well as the right wing, and because of the sudden increase in the number of wolves, they began to open up the camp. Afterward, Huan came out to them and asked why they were stopping. After all, this was not the place they had planned to reveal the camp. Liu Feng explained the situation with the wolves, and it was almost night. Huan asked why they shouldn't just speed up and hurry to the camp, but Liu Feng explained that if they sped up, they would probably be attacked before they reached the right place, and for safety reasons, they should stay here. Huan got nervous and looked at the goods and asked Liu Feng if the wolves were already here, and Liu Feng asked what they were delivering, but Huan, pouring sweat, explained that he couldn't say since it was a secret of the Chamber of Commerce. After which, he bowed to Liu Feng and asked that he protect their caravan, and in just a moment, Huan began issuing orders to protect the cargo. Xuelong asked if the old man refused to talk about what they were delivering, and Liu Feng said that he wouldn't say anything until he died. Xuelong sighed and said that if they hadn't been offered triple payment, he would have immediately abandoned this mission. Afterward, Bao Gang approached him and asked him not to get so angry because of them. Just as suddenly, Liu Feng bellowed as he looked up at the sky, for the moon was already full. The commanders looked at the moon and asked what should happen when the moon is full, to which Liu Feng replied that blood wolves have their individual ability revealed. It's called Enraged Howl. When the moon is full, the attack power and stamina of wolves increase greatly. Xuelong climbed on the white tiger and shouted to his men that the blood wolves were only third level, but there were more and more of them, but they couldn't be afraid of them because they had been fighting for a long time. So after completing this mission, everyone's reward would increase by 30%, and he would take them to the best pubs in the city. And from such a good speech, and especially from the mention of pubs with wine and girls, the warriors were inspired to fight and were ready to kill all the wolves. Liu Feng said that although the blood wolves were strong, but the soldiers' morale was at its peak. Just as suddenly, Sophie lifted Liu Feng's head and asked if she needed to raise his morale, but he blushed and stepped back, telling her not to, which made her giggle and say it was funny to look at his shy face. After a short interval, some of the soldiers started to notice the wolves slowly starting to advance, and they had already surrounded them. Liu Feng asked Sophie not to get too far away from him, but she asked him not to look down on her, because they were only level 3 wolves, and they were definitely not capable of harming her. And a moment later, all the wolves surrounding them raced straight toward the center of the caravan. Long ordered the archers to prepare volleys, the mages to prepare spells, and the warriors to protect their lines. Then he gave the archers the order to fire a volley, and immediately the whole sky was strewn with arrows that killed many wolves. He then ordered the wolf leader to be killed, but it was too late and he jumped over the fences. In response, Liu Feng immediately bounced off the ground and prepared to face the ringleader. He struck the wolf with his holy sword, but it caught him with its fangs. Liu Feng was surprised that the wolf was so ferocious as it suddenly threw him, sending him to the ground. No sooner had Liu Feng landed than hordes of blood wolves rushed over. Seeing Liu Feng falling towards the wolves, the trio panicked, and Sophie immediately rushed towards him. Right before he fell, Liu Feng created a mirror clone, and immediately jumped away from him, rushing back towards the wolf leader. He called out to the overgrown dog, and before he knew it, he had already been robbed of his life. And as soon as Liu Feng landed, an excited Sophie ran over to him. Liu Feng apologized to her for making her worry, but she replied that no one was worried about him and she was just passing through. Liu Feng asked why she had come then, to which Sophie replied that she had decided to change her plan and was about to leave. Just as suddenly, the wolf howl was heard again, and Liu Feng and Sophie once again prepared for battle. But after a moment, all the wolves turned around and started running away, leaving them puzzled. Long was stunned by Liu Feng's movements and asked for him to teach it to him. Bao Gang asked where he learned how to create clones that could attack and disappear instantly. And Liu Feng replied that it was a small trick and that he was pleased that the commanders were having fun. Whereupon Sophie explained that asking people about the strongest tricks was a taboo among mercenaries. Long laughed awkwardly at this and said that if Brother Liu didn't want to talk about it, then they wouldn't ask either. To which Jia Sha immediately agreed, and Bao Gang thanked him for helping him deal with the wolves. Just as suddenly, Liu Feng mentioned that this wave was only a preliminary test and that he was scared to think about what could be next. After all, their battle had just begun. The trio asked him what they should do, and Liu Feng pointed at himself, surprising Long and Bao Gang. Then they asked if it was too dangerous, for although he was strong, he was still alone. But Liu Feng reminded them that he wasn't alone, and pointing at Sophie said he had a partner. Liu Feng explained that the number of wolves was simply colossal, and they are unable to contain them from all sides by distributing all the forces. And so it falls on the three commanders to defend the three fronts, while he and Sophie alone will defend the fourth front. After that, Liu Feng gave them some instructions, and they used magic to create a lava moat to defend themselves. Liu Feng had warned them that it wouldn't be easy, and Long was shocked at what territory-changing magic could do. Bao Gang praised Liu Feng for his ingenuity. After all, not many people could think of something like this. Suddenly scouts came running into the camp and immediately shouted that a huge number of wolves were moving from the west, east and north. The commanders were stunned that the wolves had returned so soon and besieged them again, and the commanders immediately retreated to their positions, asking Liu Feng to signal if he encountered any problems. Liu Feng moved towards the wolves and asked Sophie to stay here to kill those who would break through. Then she asked if he really wanted to fight alone. Liu Feng released his inner energy and said that in his city, there was a great hero Zhao who killed endless crowds of many thousands of army and millions of horses, and eventually became an eternal legend. And today, Liu Feng was also going to become a hero, someone who could slay thousands of wolves. Liu Feng beckoned the wolves with his finger and they immediately rushed towards him, after which Liu Feng began to destroy them like cockroaches. Sophie was amazed at how many wolves there were, but Liu Feng chopped them down without letting them pass any further. Liu Feng's advantage was that these wolves were only level 3, and just because of these endless hordes, he thought that he needed to study Huaxia better in order to master area damaging skills. After a while, Sophie called Liu Feng to come back and rest, saying that she would replace him for a while. Liu Feng didn't refuse to rest and created a mirror clone and jumped back to Sophie. Sophie asked him why he shouldn't just leave the clone here since the skill was so strong, to which he replied that the clone could only exist for a short time, so Sophie would have to go after him. He said that there were more and more wolves, and if this continued, it would be a bad situation. Taking a breath, Liu Feng asked Sophie to stay here while he scouted the situation, and she asked if he was worried about the other flanks not holding back the onslaught. After inspecting the flanks, Liu Feng recognized that he had greatly underestimated the danger coming from the wolves, and they might suffer casualties soon. At the same time, Long kept chopping down the hordes of wolves as he suddenly noticed one of them gnawing on his companion. He immediately wanted to take revenge on the wolf as suddenly another wolf jumped on the distracted Xuelong, who was cut down a moment later. After saving Xuelong, Liu Feng said that he should do him a favor. Xuelong asked why he was here. He suspected that probably Liu Feng couldn't contain his flank and decided to escape. To which Liu Feng replied that he couldn't lose so easily considering that this crowd wasn't enough to get through Xuelong. Xuelong revealed that they still hadn't fallen, but they had suffered heavy losses. Liu Feng told him that the wolves were never ending and that if things continued like this, they might lose. From which Xuelong cursed and asked what could have happened to make the blood wolves so mad. And Liu Feng said that in such a critical situation, they could afford to demand a fee increase for this case, but even that money won't be enough to risk their lives. After a while, the blood wolves retreated and Bao Gang gave out orders to those who had some strength left. After that, Liu Feng came up behind him and asked if they were alright. To which Bao Gang replied that almost a third of the warriors had been killed, and that they probably wouldn't be able to withstand the next wave. After thinking it over properly, Liu Feng grabbed the commanders and went to the chairman's tent. The guards blocked his path since he didn't have permission, but Liu Feng just walked through them, and once inside the tent they caught the surprised look of Chairman Huan. Huan panicked and immediately hiding a certain document in a book demanded an answer as to what the four of them were doing here, for he had left guards behind. Liu Feng demanded an answer what they were delivering. After all, they must know what made the wolves steal so crazy. And the one reminded him that he had already communicated that he couldn't and also had no plans to tell them about it. Bao Gang reminded Huan that the Mercenary Association had the right to refuse an order if the person taking part in the mission intentionally withheld information related to the mission, and Xuelong shouted for him not to complain if they left, after which, Huan slapped the table and shouted that he wasn't hiding anything, and if they wanted to break the contract, he could notify the Mercenary Association and they would be chased out of the mercenary world. Liu Feng slapped the table and asked how come he wasn't hiding anything if for reasons unknown to them. They were attacked by hordes of crazy wolves, so even before they reached the beast plains, Huan began to drip sweat from this. Immediately after which Liu Feng on behalf of the fire regiment and the three commanders abandoned the mission, and Huan decided to remind them that even if they wanted to, there was no way they could leave since they were surrounded by hordes of wolves, to which Liu Feng replied that it would be better than sitting here waiting for his own death, because there were more and more wolves and he didn't want to watch his brothers die here. After all, the wolves' goal is the goods they deliver, and if they leave it behind, they can get away with it. Xuelong said that either Huan would be up in arms about his goods or tell them about the cargo. After thinking about the situation for a bit, Huan asked if they really wanted to leave, right after which Liu Feng sensed something and started to dissolve. The three commanders were surprised at what they saw. Xuelong assumed it was a disguise, and Bao Gang added that it was something better since it looked like Liu Feng had completely dissolved. And a moment later, Liu Feng repelled the attack of a certain girl causing Huan to panic. Liu Feng pointed his blade at her and demanded Huan to answer what was going on here. Huan Yu had nothing to answer Liu Feng's question, so he just spat. Xuelong asked who she was and what had just happened. After which, Liu Feng praised the level 8 assassin. After all, her skills were really good since she had been hiding in this tent all this time. Xuelong was surprised by the presence of a level 8 assassin, and Bao Gang assumed that she was here to kill them. Liu Feng asked Huan one last time if he had anything to say to them, but without hearing a word, he ordered the three commanders to gather their men and leave. Liu Feng and his commanders were walking towards the exit when suddenly the assassin pounced on Liu Feng, but he grabbed her arm, and tossed her aside, saying he wouldn't spare her next time, not if she could survive the wolf invasion, of course. After which, Huan sighed and asked them to stop. He was ready to tell them everything. As soon as they left the tent, Jia Sha noticed that the killer had disappeared again, and Xuelong said that he still felt as if she was hiding somewhere, so they should be careful. Liu Feng told them not to worry because as long as he was around, she couldn't do anything to them. Then told Huan that if he didn't want to lose the guards, then his assassin should start acting normal. Huan asked him to stop making a fool of herself and she had to come out of invisibility. And eventually, they reached the carriage, which Liu Feng immediately thought was strange, because he couldn't feel what was inside. Huan agreed and said that it was because it was made of star silver. The trio was shocked to hear this, because even a small piece of star silver costs a lot of money, and they had a whole cart made of it. Liu Feng asked what they needed such a sturdy wagon for, and in response, Huan asked not to ask so many questions and opened the complicated lock of this wagon. Immediately afterward, he invited them inside to see for themselves what was being delivered. As soon as they all entered, as Huan pulled down the cloth and a white wolf cub showed underneath, everyone was amazed that they had worked so hard just to deliver this puppy. And Xuelong asked what kind of precious pet it was, and Huan awkwardly hinted to them by asking what could have made the blood wolves so crazy. Hearing this, Xuelong realized that it was the Moon Wolf King's wolf cub, and Liu Feng was interested in who it was. Xuelong explained that the Moon Wolf was the king of all the wolves on their prairie, and Liu Feng understood why the wolves were attacking them, for they were trying to save their future king. And right after that, Xuelong kicked Huan, threatening him for such antics, and it wasn't even surprising that their guards were about to leave. Just as suddenly, the shadow behind Huan came to life and out of it appeared Ing, preparing to deal with the intruders. But Liu Feng grabbed her by the neck and slammed her against the wall, reminding her to sit still if she wanted to stay alive. Huan said that they now knew the purpose of their mission, and so asked if they would continue it, and Xuelong wondered if he was crazy, because no one in their right mind would want to sacrifice their life, and Bao Gang added that they were leaving and didn't need any reward. Just as suddenly, a loud howl was heard and some people immediately realized that it was a blood moon wolf. Liu Feng asked who it was, and Xuelong explained that the blood moon wolf was the retinue of the moon wolf, and each of them possessed a 7th level, and their appearance meant that the Moon Wolf King himself was here. And that meant only one thing: there was no way they were going to let them go any further. Upon seeing the Moon Wolf King, everyone was shocked that he had actually appeared before them. It was only as he approached that the king moved away from the other wolves, which puzzled the guards. Xuelong didn't care why he did it, because now they could take the chance to kill him, and once he died then his offspring would be in their hands, and the rest of the wolves would obey them. And Huan with Bao Gang and Jia Sha were only in favor of such an outcome. Hearing this, Sophie sighed and told them that it was really a great idea, because by attacking a level 9 wolf king, they would all die. After realizing his mistake, Xuelong admitted that they couldn't do it, but they still had Liu Feng. Liu Feng asked them to calm down. After all, if the Wolf King approached them alone, he must be confident. As they came closer, the Moon Wolf King demanded that they let go of the little Moon Wolf, and only then would he let them go. Otherwise, hearing this, everyone was shocked, because this wolf could talk and had a voice like a big sister. Wolf asked who was in charge since he wanted to have a word with him, and everyone amicably pointed to Liu Feng. And Liu Feng was amazed that everyone had chosen him, because if anything went wrong, they were all dead. Sophie asked on what basis they were forcing Liu Feng to do such a dangerous act, and so she asked to say it like this. The Moon Wolf King breathed at the fact that humans were so problematic to communicate with and began to use some sort of ability. A moment later, instead of a wolf, a white-haired woman with long ears stood before them, and everyone was amazed by it, for besides the fact that the king of the Moon Wolves had turned into a human, he had also turned out to be a queen, and Sophie called out to them, reminding them not to lose their human dignity. After all, this was the king of the Moon Wolves. Afterward, they started looking up at the sky and discussing how beautiful today's moon was. Xuelong turned to Liu Feng and admitted that he felt that the king was very treacherous and dangerous to negotiate with, so he would like to personally handle it, which made Liu Feng complain that he could think of something more original. The king said that even after she took human form, they still didn't have the courage to negotiate, so she thought that humans were really quite timid creatures. Liu Feng said that he was the only one of them who could negotiate. After all, he was the only one who could escape if anything happened. Right afterward, Sophie said she would go with him because the prettier the woman, the more she lies, and she couldn't be sure he could handle her alone, or else he likes the way a she-wolf looks. Liu Feng asked if she was afraid to go since their opponent was the Moon Wolf King. After that, she asked why she should be afraid since she had him. Liu Feng came closer, introduced himself as a representative of the caravan and asked what she would like to talk about. The she-wolf found it interesting that a weakling was allowed to negotiate with her, considering humans to be unscrupulous. Then she said that her request was quite simple. She wanted the little moon wolf and whoever had stolen it to be given back to her or face the consequences. But Liu Feng hardly listened to her, succumbing to her sight against the full moon. Sophie coughed a few times in her fist so that Liu Feng would come to his senses, and he immediately began to make a fool of himself, saying that he didn't understand what kind of baby they were talking about and that they were delivering ordinary goods. After which, the she-wolf pointed at the moon silver wagon and told them not to try to deceive her, because moon wolves have a special searching technique, and she was pretty sure the little moon wolf was inside the wagon. She said that if the baby and the thief were given to her, she would let the others go, but if they disagreed, this place would be their grave. After thinking things over for a bit, Liu Feng said that he couldn't do it, but he had a suggestion. But the Wolf King immediately refused them and again demanded a wolf cub and a thief. Otherwise, the wolves would kill them all. Sophie said that if the wolves killed them all, the warriors of the holy ranks would kill every one of them. The king asked if they thought that only humans have warriors of holy rank, because among them there are wolves that live for hundreds and even thousands of years. And this is not just for nothing. Liu Feng asked them not to talk in vain, because no matter how strong they were, they had a weakness. The she-wolf asked what it was and Liu Feng said that they would have to make concessions if they wanted the baby alive and not dead. The she-wolf asked if they were trying to threaten her, to which Liu Feng replied that although threatening was not heroic, but for the sake of his companions, he was willing to do even that. The she-wolf was convinced that people were really mean, because no matter how many years passed, they were still the same. Liu Feng said that it was only because he had to do it because of the situation and the she-wolf agreed to listen to his proposal. But she asked to remember that it was not because they were afraid of them, but only for the safety of the baby. Liu Feng offered to let them out of the ring, and at the border of their prairie they would give them the baby. But the king said he didn't believe it, because as everyone knows, a man can betray, and Sophie shouted back that they didn't believe them either, because everyone knows how cruel wolves are. The king continued to stand her ground and again demanded that they give up the baby and the thief. Liu Feng said that their promises were unsupported by anything, and therefore they would only be able to give up the baby when they were sure they could leave their prairie. The king had come to the conclusion that they could not come to an agreement, and since there was no point in their negotiations, she would soon be watching to see how long they could last under the wolf's onslaught. But if they dare to lay a finger on the little one, their fortress will be destroyed when they die. As soon as the she-wolf turned around, Liu Feng and Sophie rushed towards her, for if the negotiations failed, they would have to capture the king. As soon as Liu Feng tried to attack the king, her scarf easily repelled his strike. Afterward, the she-wolf explained that this scarf was her transformed tail, and at the same time Sophie got behind the she-wolf's back and tried to stealthily attack her. But she was insulted that she was attacked by some level 7 ragamuffin and turned around and hit her, sending Sophie flying straight into the fangs of her moon wolves. The king ordered the wolves to kill the ragamuffin. Seeing this, Liu Feng remembered how he swore to protect his loved ones and immediately awakened a new strength within himself, and even the she-wolf was surprised by this, for Liu Feng's strength had increased dramatically, and a moment before Sophie was about to fall into the jaws of the wolves as a few sword flashes suddenly glimmered, immediately after which, Liu Feng picked up Sophie and gently descended to the ground with her. After seeing the way her wolves were killed, the Wolf King wished to cut her enemies into hundreds of pieces, and used wolf rage. Liu Feng and Sophie were amazed that she was able to use this even while in human form, and her strength began to grow very much, bumping her up to saint rank. The Moon Wolf King took out her blades and immediately rushed towards Liu Feng, and the man pushed Sophie away and told her to go to the camp since he can't use all his power while she's around. Shui Long and Bao Gang were shocked that Liu Feng and the Wolf King suddenly started fighting. They were curious how the negotiations had turned into a battle, and Sophie explained that they couldn't reach an agreement because the Moon Wolf King's terms were too harsh. Huan said that it was probably because Liu Feng was still inexperienced in these matters. Then Sophie said that the king demanded that she give her the wolf cub and the thief or Huan. Huan felt slapped and said that her demands were too high and she should be taught a lesson as this was not a negotiating position at all. Liu Feng was exchanging blows with the king as suddenly her hair wrapped around his sword, surprising Liu Feng with their strength. The king asked what he could do in such a case, for her royal hair is as strong as steel. Then she decided to deal Liu Feng a decisive blow as he suddenly created a mirror double, which made her distracted, and he was able to cut through her steely hair. Immediately afterward, he and his clone pounced on her, and it was worth it for their swords to pass through the defenses as it backed up a moment before striking. The Moon Wolf King asked Liu Feng what it was and he said that it was a mirror clone, but the king said she wasn't dumb and asked how a clone could even attack. and he said that whether she believes it or not, when men lie girls believe it, but when they tell the truth girls mistake it for a lie, which is quite ironic. The king praised Liu Feng for not being so bad and smilingly asked what his name was. Liu Feng didn't bother to hide his name, and the king said that she would remember it, but purely out of curiosity, she wanted to know who his teacher was. Liu Feng thought it was funny that she wanted to know his background before killing him, all because of a little trick, and he decided to tell her that his teacher considered him the dumbest student and therefore he had no right to say his name, but if he died today, his brothers would come to take revenge, and if by some miracle they kill them too, then the teacher himself will come afterward. The king felt that even if he was lying, she could not kill him, and so she must teach this boy a lesson, and after pondering, the king decided to take her second form, surprising Liu Feng with this. The more her strength increased, Sophie asked how she could even continue to grow her power, and Xue Long decided to remind her of how he had persuaded them to give up the wolf cub. Sophie realized that the old man was to blame for all their troubles and immediately rushed to him with a knife at the ready. Ying had expected this and therefore tried to help Huan, but to her regret Xue Long and Bao Gang blocked her way. Sophie put the knife to Huan's neck and told him that if Liu Feng was in a dangerous position, she would give him and the wolf up without a second thought. After hearing this, Huan became even more agitated and began to beg Liu Feng to let him win. After finishing the transformation, the king roared loudly and told Liu Feng that he would now see the true power of the saint rank. But Liu Feng said that she was bluffing. After all, she was obtaining strength from external sources to temporarily reach the saint rank. The king was shocked that this person was able to notice that she was raising her rank using the powers of heaven and earth. Liu Feng was satisfied that he was able to scare her by using random deductions and was about to continue bluffing, as suddenly she shouted that today she would kill them all, for humans bring too much trouble to her pack. But moments before the impact, Liu Feng managed to escape with the help of a mirror clone, and as he landed he complimented her on her ability to attack stealthily as well, to which the king, licking her fingers, replied that she could tell him about how to sneak attack, and unleashing all her power she told him she would no longer allow him to escape using her mirror clone. Liu Feng realized that he was between life and death right now, hence it was time to give his best. Immediately afterward he disappeared, causing the king to marvel at his speed, but suddenly, the king felt something and saw Liu Feng attacking her from the air. She then used her hands to try to block his quadruple attack. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet began to crack, and she used earth energy to fight off Liu Feng, and seizing the opportunity, she abruptly jumped off the ground and rushed towards Liu Feng. After giving him many cuts with her claws, she told him that they were finished, and now she would deal with all his friends. But no sooner had she stepped away from him than she sensed something terrible and immediately turned around. The Moon Wolf King was shocked that Liu Feng was still able to stand. Liu Feng shouted to her that no one dared to do any harm to his friends, and tearing towards her he added that if she wanted to kill them, she'd have to go through him first. The king was amazed at how fast he was, but still managed to fend off his attack. But Liu Feng was still able to break through her defense, further shocking her. She couldn't understand how this happened. Just as suddenly, an old man with a moon on his forehead appeared and asked Liu Feng not to use this deadly skill. It wasn't until she saw the old man that Sophie realized that this was a true holy rank among the wolves, and Huan panicked that they were finished. The old man was interested in such a huge but strange power and even wondered who his teacher was. However, he noticed that Liu Feng didn't have a strong will, and therefore couldn't easily control the force. So he touched Liu Feng's forehead and ordered him to wake up. And after a moment, Liu Feng still woke up, right after which he asked what was going on, to which the old man replied that he had lost control of his power, and therefore could have made a big mistake. But the she-wolf caught fire with the fire of anger, and said that it was a very great mistake, for he had scratched her face, and therefore must die. But the old man grabbed the she-wolf and asked her to calm down, leaving everything to Uncle Bai. And Liu Feng noticed that whereas before she was like an older sister, now she had become a completely different person, or rather a different wolf. The she-wolf asked her uncle why he had come, and he explained that he had come because he was worried about her using wolf rage, and afterward asked her why she had brought so many wolves with her, and pointing to the camp the she-wolf explained that they had kidnapped the moon wolf cub, and therefore he must rescue it. And Liu Feng explained that he wasn't guilty of it since he didn't even know about the wolf cub originally, but he was willing to give it to them if they could guarantee its safety, and let them all leave the field. To which the old man replied that he could only guarantee their safety as long as the moon wolf was kept safe. The she-wolf then suggested that her uncle capture the man who had kidnapped the wolf since there was no way they could let him get away with it. He replied that while he was here he would decide what they should do, and they would discuss her opinion when they returned. And that one sat behind her uncle's back resenting the fact that she is the king but he still treats her like a child, and he felt regret for this child. After which, he demanded that Liu Feng give the wolf cub back to them. But the man asked the old man to call off the wolves before he could bring the wolf cub back. Then he whistled and all those hordes of wolves immediately ran away. Liu Feng thanked the old man for his trust and said that he would only be able to hand over the wolf cub in half an hour, and then ran to the camp, where Sophie was already waiting for him. Juan was filled with hope from the fact that Liu Feng had returned and asked if they could go now, and the latter said that they had half an hour to return the wolf cub to them, and only then would they survive. But Wanya had a hard time accepting that they would have to give up the moon wolf cub. Then Liu Feng told him that he might not give up the wolf cub and stay here himself, but they no longer needed the reward for the mission. Then he ordered everyone to pack up as they would have to leave here in half an hour. Juan felt regret for everything that had happened, and told Liu Feng that he was willing to give them the wolf cub. After a while, Liu Feng came out of the camp with the wolf cub and returned it to the old man, assuring him that the wolf cub was fine. Immediately afterward, the she-wolf snatched the wolf cub out of his arms in a flash and began hugging and squeezing it. After Liu Feng was sure that he could trust Liu Feng, the old man handed him a golden token and said that he could use it to visit their fields whenever he wanted. After that, a portal opened behind the old man and said goodbye to Liu Feng, telling him to visit them if he had the chance. And the she-wolf added that she would kill Liu Feng if he dared to come to them. And that one smirked at how vindictive this she-wolf was. After a while, Shui Long reported that the wagons were all packed and ready to leave, and Jia Sha laughed at what an exciting day they had had and said that he could now boast that he had survived the wolf siege. Suddenly, a portal opened in front of Liu Feng, putting him in a stupor, and after a moment the old wolf came out of it, saying under his breath that the older he gets the worse his memory gets, and told Liu Feng that he had almost forgotten that he had one more thing to do with him. That's where I'm going to end it. So guys, if you liked this video and you want part 2, let's get 1000 likes on this video. Also subscribe to the channel, click on the bell and like, but most importantly, leave a comment. Until the next video.